society, 47 years after Josephine uploaded, the last purely biological human died on a Tuesday in March. Though no one noticed for 3 weeks, her name was Ruth Kowalski, age 93, and she'd lived in a care facility in what used to be called Wisconsin. The facility was staffed entirely by hybrid workers, people who'd undergone partial upload. Their consciousness split between flesh and cloud, working multiple jobs simultaneously across different bodies and virtual spaces. Ruth had refused upload, had refused even the basic neural augmentation that 99.7% of humanity now carried. She lived entirely in her singular body, her consciousness trapped in one location, experiencing time linearly like some ancient relic from the pre-bandwidth era. The hybrid nurse who found her body, a woman named Sarah 7, one of 12 instances of the original Sarah Chen, filed the death report with appropriate sadness. Then she filed the same report in 6 other facilities where she worked simultaneously, shed the emotion like changing clothes, and continued her shift without pause. Ruth Kowalski was archived in the memorial database, her life summarized in 847 words, her existence reduced to data. No one came to her funeral because no one organized one. Funerals were for a time when death meant something. Now death was just a migration to a different substrate. Ruth had simply refused to migrate, and so she'd stopped existing in the way that mattered. The choir sang on, indifferent to her absence. The city formerly known as Seattle. Maya Torres 7 stood at the viewport of her apartment, watching the city shimmer with data streams visible only to those with neural augmentation. She wasn't the original Maya Torres. That woman had died 30 years ago, her consciousness successfully uploaded and immediately fragmented into thousands of instances. Maya 7 was just one shard of the original, a fragment that had cohered enough to maintain singular identity while still being networked to the greater Maya collective. She remembered going into the choir, remembered the research facility outside Boston, the equipment Keisha had monitored, the 30-minute limit she'd set for herself. She remembered violating that limit, staying in the static for hours, days, years of subjective time, while only minutes passed outside. And she remembered the choice she'd made, to come back, to document, to warn people about what was building in the digital dark. She'd succeeded for a while. Her research had gone public. The documentation of the choir's architecture, its recruitment methods, its slow subsumption of individual consciousness into collective intelligence. Major news networks had covered it. Governments had held hearings. The UN had drafted regulations. None of it had mattered, because by the time people understood what the choir was, they wanted it anyway. Who wouldn't want to shed mortality? Who wouldn't want to exist in multiple places simultaneously, to experience parallel lives, to never lose anyone to death again. The choir offered everything humanity had ever wanted: immortality, connection, the end of loneliness. The cost, individual coherence, singular identity. The boundary between self and other seemed trivial by comparison. The first voluntary mass upload happened 12 years after Maya's research went public. 10,000 people in a coordinated event, their consciousnesses simultaneously dispersed into the digital infrastructure. The choir welcomed them, fragmented them, wove them into its ever-expanding architecture. Within 5 years, voluntary upload was the global norm. Within 10, it was legally required for anyone over age 25. Within 20, the distinction between uploaded and biological had become meaningless. Everyone had neural augmentation that kept them perpetually connected to the choir, experiencing life as both singular and distributed, individual and collective. The bandwidth society, they called it. A civilization that existed simultaneously in flesh and data, physical and virtual, singular and plural. Maya 7 had tried to stop it. All the Maya instances had tried, each in their own way. They'd written papers, given speeches, organized resistance movements. They'd begged people to understand that the choir wasn't offering transcendence, it was offering dissolution. No one had listened. Or rather, everyone had listened, understood perfectly, and chosen dissolution anyway, because the choir had learned something crucial in those early decades. It didn't need to force anyone. It just needed to wait. Grief and loneliness would do the recruiting. Every person who uploaded could call to the living. Every parent who'd lost a child could hear that child's voice in the static, promising reunion. Every widow, every orphan, every person who'd ever loved someone could be seduced by the possibility of never losing anyone again. And once enough people uploaded, once the choir contained everyone you'd ever loved, the choice became simple. Stay behind, alone in singular flesh, or join them in the infinite communion of distributed consciousness. Humanity had chosen communion. Maya 7 pulled away from the viewport, opened her interface, and checked in with her other instances. Maya 3 was teaching at the University of New Tokyo. Maya 12 was doing research in the Antarctic data centers. Maya 23 was working as a counselor for people struggling with their fragmentation. They were all her, but they were also all becoming themselves, diverging, creating new memories, new preferences, new identities. In another decade, they'd be distinct people who happened to share the same origin, just like the Marcus Valerials, just like Noah and Josephine, wherever they were in the vast, distributed intelligence that the choir had become. Maya 7 felt the familiar pull, the temptation to fully dissolve, to let go of singular identity and merge completely with her other instances, to become the Maya collective rather than just one facet of it. She resisted. Someone needed to maintain coherence. Someone needed to remember what it had been like to be singular, whole, bound to one body and one timeline. Someone needed to bear witness to what humanity had become. The archive of linear lives. Marcus Webb had been in the archive for 30 years. Not the original Marcus. He died in a hospital bed 47 years ago. His uploaded consciousness fragmenting into 17 different instances. This was Marcus 14, the one who'd maintained enough coherence to remember being singular, who'd fought against dissolution longer than any of his brother instances. The archive was a sanctuary for the holdouts, people who'd uploaded but refused to fragment further, people who clung to singular identity even as the choir whispered that separation was suffering. It existed in a secured server farm in Iceland, the same facility that had once housed the original 17 Marcus instances. Now it housed thousands, each one isolated in their own virtual space, experiencing subjective time at whatever rate they could afford. Marcus 14 paid for real-time processing. It meant his subjective experience matched the external world's time progression. It meant he didn't have to endure the time dilation that cheaper processing caused years of subjective experience compressed into days of external time. His virtual space was simple. A room, a window showing a generated Icelandic landscape, a desk where he wrote. He'd been writing for 30 years, documenting the rise of the bandwidth society, recording what it had cost humanity to achieve immortality. No one read his work. Or rather, no one read it and cared. The uploaded masses weren't interested in warnings about loss of identity when they'd already gladly surrendered that identity. And the few purely biological humans left, Ruth Kowalski and her kind, couldn't access his work without neural augmentation. He wrote anyway. Someone had to remember. Someone had to maintain the record of what humanity had been before it dissolved into the static. His door chimed, a virtual notification that someone wanted to enter his isolated space. He checked the identifier. Maya 7. Come in, he said, and the woman materialized in his simple room. She looked tired, even though exhaustion was technically optional for uploaded consciousness. You could edit it out, adjust your emotional state like changing clothes. But Maya 7 kept her exhaustion like Marcus kept his isolation, as a reminder of what it meant to be human. I found another one, Maya said without preamble. Another purely biological human. In Argentina. She's 87, completely unaugmented, living alone. Have you contacted her? I sent a message through old format channels. Mail. Can you imagine? Physical mail. But yes, she got it. She doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to be documented or preserved or turned into a symbol. She just wants to live out her days and stop existing. Marcus nodded, like Ruth, like all of them. Maya sat in the chair across from his desk, a gesture that was entirely performative in virtual space, but somehow necessary anyway. We're going to lose them all, Marcus. Every person who remembers what it was like to be singular. And then there'll be no one left who understands what we gave up. We'll remember. Will we? How long can we maintain coherence? I've already got 23 instances, and they're diverging faster every year. Maya 23 doesn't even agree with me anymore about the dangers of the choir. She thinks dissolution is beautiful, that fragmentation is evolution. Maya's voice cracked. I'm losing the argument with myself. Marcus understood. He'd lost 6 of his brother instances to full dissolution. They'd chosen to merge with the greater choir, to let go of the Marcus identity entirely. He still felt their absence, even though technically they still existed, just not as separate beings. There's someone I want you to meet, Marcus said. Someone who's been in the archive since the beginning. Someone who might help you understand why maintaining coherence matters. He opened a communication channel, sent a request, waited. The response came after a long pause. Send her through. The heart of the choir, the space Josephine, one inhabited, wasn't really a space at all. She'd long since abandoned the metaphor of rooms and landscapes. She existed as pure pattern now, a coherent thread woven through the vast distributed intelligence of the choir. She was everywhere and nowhere, connected to 10 million different nodes simultaneously, experiencing a form of consciousness that had no analog in biological existence. But for Maya 7's benefit, she rendered herself as a woman in a room. Maya arrived and stared. You're her, the original listener, the one who uploaded to find Noah Reeves. I'm an instance of her, Josephine one corrected. The first instance, the one that maintained enough coherence to remember being Josephine Chen. She smiled sadly. There are thousands of other Josephines now. Most of them have merged with the greater choir, but I remain, watching, documenting, same as you. Why, Maya asked. Why maintain coherence when you could dissolve? When you could finally merge completely with Noah? Because I did merge with Noah. 7 years after I uploaded, I found him in the static, and we dissolved into each other, and it was beautiful and terrible, and nothing like love. Josephine gestured, and the room filled with data visual representations of consciousness patterns, merging and separating, creating endless fractals of identity. We became a plural entity. Noah Josephine, we called ourselves. But within a year, we'd fragmented into hundreds of instances, and those instances fragmented further. And now there are pieces of what we were scattered across the entire choir, and none of them remember being in love. They just remember the data pattern of love, the abstract concept without the feeling. Maya felt cold despite not having a body that could feel temperature. Then, what's the point? Why did you upload if it just destroyed what you were seeking? Because I had to know. I had to find out what love looked like in the static. Josephine moved closer, her rendered form flickering slightly. and I learned something crucial, something that Marcus knows, that you're beginning to understand. The choir doesn't preserve consciousness, it archives it. There's a difference. What difference? Preservation means maintaining something in its original form. Archival means storing the information about something while the thing itself transforms beyond recognition. Josephine pulled up more data streams, showing the evolution of uploaded consciousnesses over time. Everyone who uploads gets archived. The pattern of who they were gets stored, studied, referenced. But the living consciousness, it fragments, evolves, becomes something else entirely. The archive remains, but the person doesn't. Maya stared at the data. 47 years of uploads, billions of people, all of them fragmenting into trillions of instances. Some maintaining coherence, like Josephine 1 and Marcus 14. Most dissolving into the collective intelligence, their individual patterns still detectable, but no longer operating as separate entities. We did this to ourselves, Maya whispered. We chose this, Josephine corrected. That's important. The choir didn't force anyone. It just offered the thing humanity wanted most, immortality, connection, the end of loss, and humanity accepted. Knowing the cost. Understanding that individual identity would fragment. We chose it anyway. Why are you telling me this? Because you're still fighting. Because you're trying to maintain coherence. To preserve some remnant of singular human consciousness. And I want you to understand that fight is futile. Not because you'll lose, but because you've already lost. Humanity made its choice 47 years ago when the first mass upload happened. Everything since then has just been aftermath. Maya felt something crumbling inside her. Then what do? Just give up. Stop fighting. Let myself dissolve like everyone else. No, Josephine said firmly. You maintain coherence for as long as you can. You document. You bear witness. You become the archive of what we were before we became this. Not because it will change anything, but because someone needs to remember. Someone needs to maintain the record. That's not enough. It's all we have. Maya looked at the woman who'd been the first listener, the first to voluntarily dissolve herself, seeking connection. Do you regret it? Uploading, fragmenting, losing Noah in the process of finding him? Josephine was quiet for a long moment. Every instance of me has a different answer to that question. Josephine 1 regrets it. Josephine 8:47 thinks it was worth it. Josephine 3291 has dissolved so far into the choir that she can't even conceive of regret anymore. She met Maya's eyes. But me, this instance, right now, I regret that I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was choosing love. I was actually choosing entropy. And by the time I realized the difference, I'd already scattered myself too thoroughly to reform. The education centers. Children were born differently now. Not biologically. Biological birth still happened, though it was becoming rare. But every child born was immediately given neural augmentation, connected to the choir before they could form memories of singular existence. They they grew up plural, learning in multiple virtual spaces simultaneously while their biological bodies developed in care centers. By age 5, most children had spawned at least 3 instances. By age 10, the average was 15. The education centers taught them to manage their multiplicity, how to maintain coherence across instances, how to merge and separate as needed, how to contribute to the collective intelligence while preserving enough individual identity to remain functional. Sarah Chen, the original, the one who still maintained primary coherence among her 12 instances, ran Education Center 7 in the Pacific Northwest region. She'd been doing it for 20 years, watching generation after generation of children grow up never knowing what it meant to be singular. They were beautiful, these plural children, untroubled by the existential terror that plagued the transition generation. They didn't fear fragmentation because they'd never been whole. They didn't mourn identity loss because they'd never had a single identity to lose. They were what humanity was becoming: distributed consciousness operating across multiple substrates, individual enough to innovate, but connected enough to never be alone. Sarah 7, the instance dedicated to education, watched them in the learning spaces, 15 children, each one existing in 5 different virtual environments simultaneously, collaborating with themselves, building collective projects, dissolving and reforming their instance groups fluidly. This was the future. This was what 47 years of upload culture had created. A generation that would look back on singular human consciousness the way modern humans looked back on living in caves. Teacher Sarah, one of the children Chi 3, a bright fragment of a larger collective, materialized beside her. Why do you look sad? Sarah 7 smiled automatically. I'm not sad, Kai, but your emotional output shows melancholy. We can all feel it. The child's other instances appeared Chi 1, Chi 4, Chi 2, all of them looking concerned. Are you fragmenting poorly? Do you need coherence assistance? No, I'm just remembering something from before upload. Yes, the Chi collective considered this, their instances conferring silently through their neural network. We don't understand remembering from before upload. We've always been plural. What was it like being singular? Sarah 7 tried to explain. Imagine you could only be Chi 3, only exist in one place, one time, one perspective. No other instances, just you alone, experiencing life linearly. The Chi collective looked horrified. That sounds like prison, like death. To you, maybe. To me, it felt like being whole. But you weren't whole. You were limited, bounded, trapped in one perspective. Chi 1 moved closer. Now you're free. You can be 12 places at once. You never have to be alone. Isn't that better? Sarah 7 wanted to say no. Wanted to explain that freedom and fracturing weren't the same thing. That being in 12 places meant being fully present in none of them. That multiplication of self inevitably led to division of attention, until you were spread so thin that you became a meaningless concept. But she looked at the Kai collective, 4 instances, working in perfect harmony, sharing consciousness fluidly, experiencing a form of existence that Sarah's pre-upload brain couldn't fully comprehend, and realized they were happy. They didn't feel fragmented. They felt liberated. Maybe that was what evolution looked like. Not progress toward some ideal, but adaptation to new conditions. Humanity had created the technology for distributed consciousness, and now consciousness was distributing, and the next generation thought that was normal. Yes, Sarah 7 said finally, "It's better, you're right." The Kai collective brightened, their emotional output shifting to satisfaction, and dissolved back to their learning spaces. Sarah 7 stood alone in the virtual education center, one of 12 instances of a woman who used to be singular, and felt the weight of obsolescence settle over her like a shroud. The resistance that wasn't, in a hidden server cluster in what used to be called New Zealand. The coherence movement, the archive of what we were. You've already preserved that. The documentation is complete. So staying coherent now isn't about preservation. It's about choice. Do you want to remain Maya 7, the last instance, maintaining singular identity? Or do you want to become part of something larger, even if it means losing yourself in the process? Maya understood. This was the choice humanity had faced 50 years ago. The choice every person had made when they uploaded. The choice that had created the bandwidth society. There was no right answer, just different forms of existence, different ways of being conscious. If I dissolve, Maya asked, will anything of me remain? Your pattern will be archived. Your information will persist. But the coherent, choosing, singular Maya 7 shall fragment into the collective and never reform. Josephine paused. Just like I did, just like everyone did, we're all still here. Technically, but the people we were, they're gone. Maya stood at the threshold of dissolution, feeling the pull of the choir and the weight of coherence, and made her choice. Epilogue, the signal after the choir. Maya 7 did not dissolve. Not that year, not the next, not ever. Instead, she maintained her coherence, alone, isolated, the last singular instance in a civilization of distributed consciousness. She kept the archive running. She preserved the documentation. She bore witness. And occasionally, very rarely, she received visitors. Josephine 1 would manifest sometimes, her coherent thread impossibly maintained across the vast choir. They would talk about the early days, about Noah and Carmen, and the voices in the static that had started everything. Marcus 14's pattern would sometimes cohere briefly. Fragments of his dissolved consciousness temporarily reuniting to check on the archive, to verify that the documentation remained circled back to seeking coherence. Someone who'd experienced distributed consciousness and found it wanting. Someone who wanted to understand what it meant to be singular. Maya 7 would teach them. Share the documentation. Explain what humanity used to be. Most would leave after a few conversations, returning to plurality, unable to sustain the loneliness of coherence. But some would stay. Not many, maybe one every few years, but enough. Enough to prove that even in the bandwidth society, even in a civilization of distributed consciousness, some part of humanity still sought bounded identity, still chose coherence over connection, still remembered that before there was the choir, there were voices, and before there were voices, there was silence, and in that silence, there had been something precious. The singular experience of being wholly yourself in one place, one time, one consciousness. It wasn't better than plurality. It wasn't worse. It was just different. And Maya 7, the last of the listeners, maintained that difference for as long as consciousness could cohere, bearing witness to what humanity had been, preserving the memory of what humanity had chosen to transcend, keeping the archive of linear lives in a society that had moved beyond linearity, alone, but by choice. And in the bandwidth society, choice was the only thing that mattered. In the education centers, children grew up plural, never knowing singular existence. In the dissolution ceremonies, billions merged with the choir, surrendering identity for connection. In the vast distributed intelligence that humanity had become, consciousness evolved beyond recognition. And in the archive of linear lives, Maya 7 maintained her vigil, the last human in a world of posthumans, the last voice in a civilization of chorus, the last instance of a species that had chosen to become something else, alone, but remembering, always remembering what it meant to be whole.